and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Recently, electoral watchdog BERSIH published a detailed report on the 15th general election, highlighting certain shortcomings in the current election process or procedures, along with their recommendations for the government and for the Election Commission. What will their recommendations be heeded for future elections? And might there be opportunities for electoral reform in time for those 6 state elections that will happen in a few months' time? Joining me on the show to discuss this further, to discuss the election observation report on the 15th general election is Thomas Fan. He's the chairperson of BERSIH. Thomas, thank you for joining me on the show. And I was thinking, to kick things off, before we get to the results of the monitoring, I was hoping you could set the context for us. BERSIH mobilized the GE15 monitoring team for the duration of the elections. That means it was just before the dissolution, it was just after the dissolution of Parliament till polling day. Can we talk a little bit about what that meant, what that means? Explain the role of the GE15 monitoring team, please.
Yes, thank you, Melissa, for having me on the show. Yes, so when the Prime Minister announced the dissolution of Parliament on the 10th of October, we were already, like many Malaysians, already anticipating that election might be called anytime. So we immediately put out the call for volunteers to come forward and be our on-the-ground election observers. And we were targeting to monitor about 50 hot seats or constituencies rather than all 222. So the plan was to have 2 observers for each of these hot seats, and therefore we were just looking for 100 volunteers. But to our surprise, actually within 3 days, we got about almost 300 people signing up, volunteering to be observers. So we have to kind of like screen through and see whether they fit the constituency that we want to target. And so we got our 100. Then on top of that, we also want to monitor online, social media, how the parties and candidates were contesting and what messaging were they sent out. So we also had another pool of about 10 volunteers to just monitor online, and also a few more to just gather news report from media that reported on election offences and speeches made by the candidates. So these were the monitoring that we were covering for G15.
So in previous general elections, had there been online monitors, media monitors before?
Yes, they were, but this time around a bit more. Another area that came up, which we didn't quite anticipate, was kind of like dealing with misinformation and fake news. This time around, it seems to be a lot more than previous election, simply because I think more people are using social media, WhatsApp than before. And so from day one, we were inundated almost on a daily basis with different kind of fake news and misinformation, and we had to kind of come up with the correct information to counter this misinformation and disinformation.
Okay, so BERSIH played the role of fact checker during the elections. What does that tell you, Thomas, that more than 300 people wanted to be part of this monitoring effort? I mean, far more, 3 times more than what you needed. What does that tell you about the sentiment towards being part of the electoral process?
Well, it was a really pleasant surprise to us, because our main concern going into this election was the lack of interest of people, voters, in the election, because the backdrop of the Sheraton move and the politicking that was taking place in the last 2-3 years, we got a sense that people were really tired. There was apathy and disillusionment with the whole entire process. But when the response was so quite overwhelming, it was an indication that there was a lot of interest in the GE15.
I remember talking to you a lot about voter apathy and the worry about low voter turnout. But does it also indicate to you, Thomas, that a lot of people are concerned about the transparency and the trust within the electoral system, the electoral process, that they want to be one of the eyes and ears?
Yes. I think the trust in the electoral process and the election commission themselves have always been an issue. And some would say it's because of people like us who kind of like exposed them over the years. But I have to be fair to them as well. I think since GE 13 and then 14, there has been improvement made in the election process. There's more transparency, clarity, and that's why we don't hear as many complaints, even by the candidate themselves, that there was hanky-panky and wrongdoing on the part of the election workers. A lot less, and GE15 was no different, simply because I think there has been improvement made in that process. But still, judging by the amount of fake news and misinformation that was going around, there was still a lot of mistrust in the election commission. And we found ourselves in a very strange position as BERSIH, having to defend the election commission in dealing with a lot of this fake news. But we had to do it because the last thing we wanted was for people to undermine trust in the process and also the outcome of the election itself.
Because that would, in the event, if they didn't believe in the election process, then the legitimacy of that new incoming government would be in jeopardy. I want to talk about some of the improvements that the EC can make and some of the things that you did observe that the EC hadn't been quite as quick to improve on. One of the biggest issues that BERSIH observed was with the postal voting. Let's start with the overseas postal voting, Thomas, Category 1B. What were some of the observations about that process that you would like to see rectified in the future?
Yeah, okay. Before I zoom in on the shortcomings, I have to, first of all, praise the EC for opening up postal voting to all Malaysians living outside the country, including those in neighboring countries like Singapore, Southern Thailand, Brunei. So this was something that did not happen at G14 in 2018, but now is available. So that's good news.
That was because of the Johor elections, is that right?
Actually, it started from the Malacca election.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's a good thing.
State election, then the Sarawak, and then the Johor, where they had already opened up to neighboring countries. So that was good news, but it also presented a challenge to the EC because now the pool of eligible postal voter has just broadened. So by our estimate, probably 1 million Malaysians are living outside the country during polling day, and they are eligible. So the interest and the sign up for postal voting substantially increased. So just to give you a kind of idea, G14 we had just under 8,000 people signing up as postal voter category 1B overseas Malaysian, just under 8,000. This time we had 48,000 over signing up.
So, that's amazing.
That's amazing.
That is amazing. Okay, so very quickly, what were the difference? What do you think was the impetus for that? That multiple-fold increase in postal ballots.
Well, I think there's a few reasons. One is I think the number of the category of people that they allow to apply has increased. For example, Singapore itself has a huge population of Malaysian living and working there, and that kind of opened up the pool. But I think the second reason really I got to claim credit for us in the NGOs, people like BERSIH, Undi 18 Global BERSIH. We really kind of highlight this availability for people to apply and encourage them to apply as postal voter, because I can credit the EC. They were pretty quiet about it. They didn't really promote it and let people have enough time to apply. But we really pushed very hard for it, and that's why we saw the jump from about 8,000 to 48,000.
So you noted, BERSIH noted there was a lack of confusion, sorry, a lack of awareness and some confusion around the process for overseas postal voting. How do we make sure that that is simplified or rectified for future elections?
Yeah, so the process were new, even compared to G14. You had to apply online, first of all, to have an account with the EC, and then secondly, to apply to be a postal voter. So it was new to all of us. So I believe that by the next round, if they don't change the process, people would have been more familiar, and they will be more ready to apply to be postal voters. So I think the EC certainly has a duty to put out the correct information and process using mainstream media, and even working through the our overseas missions, the foreign ministry, to give out the correct information, because this is really to counter all the misinformation by so-called experts, who think they know, but they put out the wrong information out there and confuse people. So I believe that the coming 6 state elections, there will still be people wanting to apply to be postal voter, and this time everybody will be more ready to provide information.
So maintain the process, but just get the information and education out there. Is that what you're saying? Okay, all right. When we talk about postal voting, there's also category 1C, which I didn't know because I thought it was just category 1A for, army, police personnel, EC personnel, media. I thought that was one category, and then the next was overseas ballots. But I didn't realize there was another category that was also people who could vote early. What did BERSIH observe about those people? Were they able to participate in this election, in the last election?
Right. Okay. I don't have the exact number, but we are talking about a larger number of people. Okay. There's actually 3 categories: 1A, 1B, 1C. Now, 1A are those who are involved directly with the elections, election workers, SPR workers. So we are talking about, I think, about 100 over 1,000 or 200,000 of them. Then you have the 1B, the overseas Malaysians. Then the 1C are those who are not directly involved with the election, but they are required to be on duty for their work. For example, those working in hospitals, those working in media, those are in army and different emergency services that cannot take time off to be voting. So they qualify to become a postal voter as well. And sadly, many people, including management of hospitals, are not aware that this is available. So I think we acknowledge that we also failed to focus on them. So for this coming state elections, I think one of the things that I told my team is that we need to make this awareness make known to this category as well, so that people like yourself, even, who are needing to be on air at that time but cannot come out and vote, can apply to be postal voters as well.
Yeah, rather than kind of rush about to vote and then, do our duties. What about those who live out of state? I remember before just after the elections was announced, or dissolution of parliament was announced, and the polling date announced, there was so much I guess, despair over the fact that many people who live out of state had to fork out a lot of money to make sure that they got home in time to cast their ballots, especially those from Sabah and Sarawak who may work or study in Peninsula. What are the observations and ways to make sure that they are not disenfranchised from future elections?
Yes. So, for our own internal kind of categorization, we have two category here. One is we call them out of region voters. In other words, Sabahan and Sarawakian who are living and residing in Peninsula, and vice versa, West Malaysians who are residing in East Malaysia. So the numbers that we estimate are about 500,000 East Malaysian residing in Peninsula and about 60,000 West Malaysian residing in East Malaysia. This, we call them out of region. In other words, they have to fly over the South China Sea to cast their vote. So we are talking about a huge number here. And we have been calling on the EC basically to facilitate voting for them. Now, many of them, for good reasons, decided that they want to maintain their voting constituency in their own hometown, in their kawasan, simply because they see where they are. If they are East Malaysians here in Peninsula, this is just a transient, temporary place where they study, they earn a living, but they are going back to their hometown in East Malaysia, and they want to have a say in who represent them. So that's the reason why they do not want to change their voting address to here. So to facilitate them, we actually prefer that the EC provide advanced voting facility for them. In other words, they vote 3 days before polling day in a mega voting center over in the Peninsula. We are recommending that every single state in the Peninsula set up one mega voting center so that this East Malaysian, instead of traveling back at huge cost to East Malaysia to vote, they just have to take a few hours off, come to the mega voting center, cast their ballot into the ballot bag for their kawasan, for their constituency. After that, seal up. This bag will be then delivered. It's better than postal ballot because there's a high chance that the parties will offer money to buy blank postal ballot, and that would really not be something we want to see. So for this out of region voters, this is what we are recommending, and we are also recommending for out of state voters. Now, out of states are, for example, in the Klang Valley, you have a lot of people from Johor, from Kelantan, from Kedah, living and working here. So instead of during polling day, you have this mega jam at all the highways, traveling back, things like that. They should be facilitated so that they don't need to travel huge distance to cast their vote through either postal vote or, as we prefer, advanced voting as well. This can be done. These are low-hanging fruits for the EC.
Do you think that this can be done in time for the 6 state elections in a few months?
Most certainly, because we are not talking about major legal amendments to the law that need parliament approval. These are under the election regulations, and the EC do have power to categorize people and give them absentee voting right.
Okay, so it's low-hanging fruit, in your words, can be done, can be implemented almost immediately. One of the other recommendations that BERSIH is making is to have a fixed term act, a fixed term parliament act. I'm quite curious to understand more about this. How would a fixed term parliament act help with the electoral process beyond removing the uncertainty? And I'm also curious to know why we haven't considered, or why there's reluctance to push forward with this.
Yes. Um, I would say rather than using the word fixed
Oh,
date, a
fixed date.
fixed
Okay.
uh, uh, election date. Now, our law, our constitutions is such that the prime minister is has the sole discretion to initiate the process of dissolving the parliament, or in this case, the chief minister, same thing, has that sole discretion to initiate the process. But of course, ultimately, it is the Yang di Pertuan Agong or the Sultan who has the discretion to say no. But usually they would go along and say yes. So this is the law right now, which lead us to this very uh, unsatisfactory situation for Malaysian compared to many countries worldwide. We are always trying to guess the election date, you know, and sometimes we have leaders or prime ministers who kind of play with us. Oh well, depend on the mood and see how's the weather and whatnot, and and then. But you see, for us as private citizens, is frustrating simply because things like weddings and
Mm.
major events and holidays, we cannot be sure when to book because the election may be around the corner. But for businesses, this is creating havoc. You know,
So why is that? Why is it that we don't have a fixed date? Is there an advantage for a sitting prime minister, sitting menteri besar, for political parties to have that element of surprise, to hold voters hostage to the dissolution of parliament? Is that why?
yes, I mean, as the incumbent prime minister or chief minister, they have this incumbent advantage where to pick the most suitable date for themselves. They want to, for example, run like populist program ahead and raise up the feel good factor and then call for the date. They wouldn't want to call a date when there is a major scandal going on with their government. So this is an unfair advantage that our law give to the government right now. But we
Right.
are calling for a change. We are calling for more certainty, more predictability, also that people can actually plan way ahead for the election, and also add to the political stability of the country.
Would
Rather
that Right? Would that be hard to implement, having a fixed date act? I mean, is that something that needs, is that legislation that needs to be passed in Dewan Rakyat beforehand?
Yes,
Okay.
there would be legislation that need to be passed to fix the date, and also even constitutional amendment. But I want to just say that this six-state election that is coming up present an opportunity for greater certainty, simply because all six states term will expire within a period of like 2 weeks from each other, which
Mm.
means that, like it or not, they have to dissolve. And our understanding is that the prime minister has already spoken to all six states, and they agreed to dissolve together in June or thereabout. So if that is the case, they should announce the date that they are going to dissolve the assembly together. Now, with that announcement, and also with the consent of the Sultan and the governors, the date announced, the election commission by law has 60 days to set the election dates, uh,
Mm.
nomination day and also polling day. Now, if they announce it early, the EC could also come forward and say, based on that date, this is the most suitable date for the state election, and thereby we will know like at least 3, 4, 5 months ahead. Now, what the biggest beneficiary of that is actually the EC themselves, because the people that really need to do a lot of preparation to run a good election is the election commission. Contrary to popular belief that the EC knows way ahead when election is going to be, they actually are clueless. So, which means that they have to be always on the standby, ready, have the stock of indelible ink and stationery ready, waiting for the politician to make up his mind. And sometimes they have to wait for a year or two but they have to be always on the ready. So this would really help them to run prepare a better election. So we are really hoping that that will happen this time.
Okay. So in the upcoming 6 state elections, there are things that the EC can do, things that the states themselves, the state legislative assembly themselves can do as well. Thomas, thank you so much for joining me on the show today and going through this really exhaustive report for the election observation report from the 15th Malaysian General Elections prepared by BERSIH. Thank you, Thomas, for your time. I
Thank you so
appreciate it.
much, Melissa.
That was my conversation with Thomas Wan, chairperson of BERSIH, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.